Hello, everybody. As it's 11:30, we'll go ahead and get this panel started. So welcome to the 8th Annual EdGames Expo, a showcase of game-changing innovations in education technology developed through programs across government. Please make sure to check the website for more information on the more than 160 learning games and technologies that are available for educators and students to try during the month of June, and for the lineup of events across the week. Please note, you are free to type questions into the general chat as the presentations are going, and we will attempt to answer questions during the Q&A. Thank you for joining today's EdGames Expo event on disinformation and gamification. I am Robert Shaw with Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency on their Mis, Dis, and Malinformation team. I am joined today by fellow MDM mitigation actors at the Global Engagement Center at the U.S. Department of State, Thinking Habitats, and Persuasion Invasion. I'd like to give a little bit of a presentation on where we see MDM as a national security concern and why gamification is a potential and valued response. Let's start a little bit on our background here at CISA. CISA's Mis, Dis, and Malinformation team is charged with building national resilience to mis, dis, and malinformation and foreign influence activities. Through these efforts, CISA helps the American people understand the scope and scale of MDM activities targeting election infrastructure and enables them to take actions to mitigate those associated risks. A little bit about us. We came out of early 2018. We were established as the Countering Foreign Influence Task Force with the general goal of understanding and analyzing specifically state-sponsored foreign influence in the US domestic space, targeting pillars of democracy. With full recognition of the information environment in 2021, we were institutionalized as the Mis, Dis, and Malinformation team with a mission to address all MDM threats, agnostic of actors, related to critical infrastructure and the national critical functions. How do we go about building national resilience? The MDM team's plan for building national resilience has a three-pronged approach, engaging actors from across society to foster a true whole of society response to MDM. We actively engage subject matter experts to develop and push innovation in the MDM space, both on awareness building, what does the threat landscape look like, and response activities, how can we respond effectively? We translate that information and the findings from those subject matter experts over to our Trusted Voices community. Our Trusted Voices community is a broad network of folks that have constituents that may be targeted by disinformation campaigns and are interested in a joint response to mitigation and resilience building. And then we do direct engagement with the American public. This is a sustained conversation with the American people about what MDM looks like and their ability to respond. It pairs threat activity awareness with empowerment to foster resiliency in the information environment. Now, when we're talking MDM, what specifically are we talking about? MDM, Mis, Dis, and Malinformation falls across a spectrum of content. It ranges from false but benign to false but malign, and true information that is distributed to harm. So misinformation, information that is false but not intended to cause harm. It's often spread by individuals who do not know it is false. This is your aunt and uncle spreading COVID misinformation, unaware of its origin or potential impacts further along the information consumption chain. Malinformation is information that is true, but is released and presented out of context to foster false beliefs around a narrative. This is your hack and leak operations. This is your verified photos with false captions. And this is old, outdated information that is presented as genuine, up-to-date information to help change the narrative in a malign manner. And then we have disinformation. Disinformation is created or disseminated deliberately with the express purpose to mislead or to cause harm. Oftentimes we talk about weaponized misinformation. Misinformation becomes disinformation when threat actors actively perpetuate misinformation in their disinformation narratives. Now, what do we do about the MDM problem? How do we assess risk? So, CISA uses a fairly standard risk equation. Risk equals threat plus vulnerability plus consequence, sometimes articulated as vulnerability plus consequence, as moderated by threat, as threat actor activity can be hard to discern, and risk mitigation actors need to do a bit of forecasting, even absent a full landscape picture. Specific areas of threat. Threat includes the actors that are attempting to manipulate the information environment. They need to have a degree of both intent and capability. Absent one or the other, they would not be active in the space. For state-sponsored disinformation campaigns, we can assume a rather sophisticated degree of capability, but that is not always the case. It does not always translate to consequence. Now, when we're talking about vulnerabilities, we're talking about the attributes that render you open to exploitation. Those are the elements that bad actors exploit in order to cause consequence. We tend to think about vulnerability in the MDM space in two buckets. There are the technical vulnerabilities, which is the architecture of the internet and the technologies that help the transmission of information content at scale and pace. And then we also talk about cognitive vulnerabilities, attributes of thought and information processing by the individual, and sociological elements that perpetuate MDM narratives. Now we talk about consequence. Absent consequence, there would be no risk. When we talk about risk, when we talk about consequence, we're talking about it across a range of potential impacts. CISA thinks about 4 buckets of information, of consequence: physical, financial, reputational, and human. An example is with the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy, we tend to think about the human costs. What are the costs of MDM narratives on getting humans to take the vaccine and to provide that level of societal health resilience? Now, having discussed what problem we're looking at, how we break it apart, where do the mitigation responses, and specifically games, fit into a whole of society response? When we talk about mitigation, we're talking about elements that tend to reduce risk either on the threat, vulnerability, or consequence level of application. We talk about, at CISA, related to MDM, actor interventions, subject treatment, spreader engagement, and societal resilience. Actor intervention is aptly stopping access to the information environment of bad actors. This is often a law enforcement activity, but is also shared responsibility with platforms and other actors in the information space. When we talk about subject treatment, we're talking about how to help the victims of mis and disinformation campaigns that may be directly or inadvertently targeted. And this is about preparing them to talk to their audience to mitigate those consequences. And where gamification probably lands most squarely is this spreader engagement. How do you stop and limit the spread of MDM, regardless of bad actor attempts to infiltrate the information environment? Undergirding all of this is societal resilience and recognition, the long-term effort that undergirds and supports all other mitigation activities. This is media literacy, this is threat awareness, this is ongoing conversation in an authentic way with populations to help them understand their responsibilities in an information environment to maintain a healthy place to interact. Having discussed the broad overview of MDM as a national security risk and where along the line of mitigation responses gamification presents itself, I will now pass to Tyler over at the Global Engagement Center to talk about a specific example of gamification to counter disinformation. Tyler?
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll be talking over some lovely PowerPoint. So hi, everybody. I am Tyler from the Global Engagement Center. I'm a contractor supporting the GEC. For those not familiar with the GEC, we are the State Department's kind of think tank and do tank. We were directed by Congress to tackle the whole of government response to foreign disinformation. We analyze information warfare by foreign government and non-government actors. We expose it, we counter it, and we do so with the help of some special technology. So I'm on the technology engagement team, which means we do things like tech challenges and tech demos to identify innovations in the field of information operations. In 2019, we held a tech demo for a Dutch media company that had developed a video game for the Department of Homeland Security. It was called Bad News, and studies showed it could train players to identify disinformation in a fun way. We liked that game so much, we decided to make our own. So last year, working with DHS, we funded the production of Harmony Square, which aims to help players recognize common techniques of political disinformation. The game was made by the same Dutch company that made Bad News, and it is based on the same strategies developed by researchers at Cambridge University's Social Decision-Making Lab. Let me tell you a bit about why the State Department got into gaming, how we designed our game, and what it does. The GEC has access to some of the world's best data about disinformation, what works and what doesn't work to counter it. And we are convinced that digital media literacy is a critical part of the solution. The Carnegie Endowment recently analyzed 84 expert policy proposals related to countering influence operations. They found that the second most recommended policy among experts was building digital media literacy. The emerging consensus is that global populations need to be trained in how to consume media without being manipulated by malign actors. Separately, the GEC discovered the power of so-called serious games to convey a wide range of educational benefits, including media literacy. We think the data is pretty clear that the interactive experience of a game is a more efficient means of teaching media literacy than a traditional messaging campaign. My colleague from DHS introduced the concept of inoculation theory, where people gain a kind of cognitive resistance to harmful influences by being exposed to them in a controlled setting. With video games, there's an even more effective process at work, what social scientists call active inoculation, where people have agency in deciding how to confront harmful influences. Our collaborators at Cambridge have published a lot of peer-reviewed research that shows that people who confront disinformation through a video game build stronger defenses against it than people who simply learn about it passively. So that's the academic reason why the State Department got into games. The other reason we turn to games as a potential tool to combat foreign disinformation is that games are awesome. No, seriously, we think games are useful tools for foreign policy specifically because they're fun. People will do fun stuff without being told to do so by a government or a teacher, even stuff that's good for them. And I don't have to tell you all that games attract passionate, expert communities that drive research and development. We produce mods, we attend game jams, and we challenge each other. Of course, the gaming community is also a target for the bad guys. So we figured, let's beat them to it. Let's design games that do good. Without further ado, I'm going to show some of the trailer that we produced for Harmony Square. I assume that many of you have already seen this, so I'm not going to share the whole thing. But I'm going to share a little piece of it.
Excuse me,
Okay.
Tyler, there's no sound.
Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to go over the finer points of that anyway. The apologies for the sound not coming through. I'm going to switch over back to my presentation and continue from there. Thanks. So this is basically what the game looks like, and you can play it right now for free through your web browser. It takes about 15 minutes. It was originally produced as a pilot in English for audiences 15 and up, but we now have a French, German, Dutch, Czech, and Indonesian version as well, with Arabic just about finished, and Russian and Hungarian coming too. We designed the gameplay to be simple. It's a point-and-click adventure. It has a linear narrative, but you decide how you're going to get to the end, and you earn points along the way. The first thing to note is that the game world is fictional. The conflicts are exaggerated. You provoke arguments about pineapple pizza and art and low-level politics. We deliberately crafted the story to be agnostic of any particular region and dissociated from any one social or political context. We did this so that players would not feel that they are being targeted by the game for their political beliefs, which is a frequent hazard of so-called counter-messaging interventions. We've found the game works on players from any demographic with a basic understanding of online culture. The second thing to note is that this game has you play the role of the bad guy, a disinformation officer. Our field testing indicates that people like playing the bad guy more than the good guy, and that is part of the game design. But the more subtle intention of playing the bad guy is to better understand their tricks from the inside out. Briefly, the common disinformation tricks you learn about are trolling, which is taking a side in a debate and expressing exaggerated opinions, emotional manipulation, artificial amplification using social bots or fake followers, and escalation, which is dividing audiences into camps. There are obviously many more disinformation tactics and strategies out there, but these are some of the most common ones that we found lend themselves to this gameplay format. It's also worth mentioning that not all audiences are comfortable playing the bad guy. So we've crafted the game to strike a careful balance between the fun of mischief making and the seriousness of the consequences. The game narrator eases the player into the bad guy role and acknowledges that you are simulating unethical behavior in order to teach the player how to recognize it. The end of the game shows the harmful impact you have had on the community. It does not glorify it. Field testing indicates that players understand that this is not behavior to be replicated, but to be aware of. Just briefly, I'll go over the academic evaluation of the game. These results were published in a peer-reviewed journal, the Harvard Misinformation Review. Cambridge University surveyed a large sample of players, pre and post-game, and found that, compared to a control group, people who play Harmony Square find manipulative social media content significantly less reliable. They are significantly more confident in their ability to spot fake news, and they are significantly less likely to share it with others. Though we have not yet tested whether these positive effects are long-lasting, the Cambridge team behind Harmony has shown that gamified inoculation effects from very similar games can persist for months afterwards, even after relatively short exposure to the games. Harmony Square has done pretty well globally, considering that we've only shared it with English language pilot version with government partners, and we haven't marketed it very widely yet. It's been played 75,000 times, and players spend an average of about 7 minutes on it. It's earned a lot of international media exposure. We've just rolled it out in all those languages I mentioned, and soon we'll put some ad dollars behind it as well. Our US embassies have found the game works very well as a conversation starter to get classes interested in civics, freedom of speech. Our aim is to get governments and civil society institutions around the world to adopt Harmony Square in educational curricula and training programs. Maybe you could help. If so, please reach out to us at gecincubator@state.gov. We have plans for a new, bigger, and better game over the next year to teach digital media literacy and counter disinformation. We think we got the basic concept down, but we're going to need additional pedagogical strategies, new tech, new gameplay loops. If anyone has ideas on how to turn the learning objectives I've been speaking about into a fun adventure, hit me up. Any questions about my brief, please leave them in the chat box I promise we will get to them at the end. Thanks. And now I will turn the mic over to Florian. Over to you, Florian. Thanks.
Tyler, to share the screen, I need a password.
Why don't you go ahead and start talking? I will put them up on my screen and do them for you.
I think it's working now, is it? Yes. Oh, fantastic.
That's it.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Florian Feucht. I'm the founder of Thinking Habitats, and I would love to introduce you today to the W question system with interactive videos. And it's powered by Thinking Habitats. And our mission here is to empower young people with thinking tools. So the W question system empowers high school students to identify facts and fictions in the news. So it is a system developed to be used by social studies and ELA teachers. And we have a bigger system of this. It's called the Front Porch Experience, and the W question system is the core component of it. So how does this work? What is this video app that we are going to present here? So the idea is that students watch interactive videos to learn how to unpack content of news articles, how to evaluate claims and evidence, and how to determine the credibility and quality of the knowledge sources that they're reading. And these steps allow teachers to set the stage for an objective, safe discussion of current news events. And we always use local current news for students as a reading and learning material. So they are always engaged in their community on what's happening right here, right now. And this is a huge motivational hook for the students. Well, here's one quote from one student, and she says, "I learned how to really dig into an article and analyze the different sources and explanations. I learned how to think critically. I think this program really unlocked a part of my brain that I did not know that I had." So I think this says it pretty much. We are very happy to have quotes like this and also statistical hard data to support the effectiveness of this app. How does it work? It's a reliable process, and we ask students to thoroughly read local news articles and to apply the W questions to cluster the information in different categories. So if it's being categorized as a who, what, when, and where, we assume that this is a basic statement. And if it can be supported by evidence, then it would be a factual statement. Can it not be supported by evidence, then it would be an opinion, right? So now it's different if a text segment is about the why and the how. So it is really about cause and effect claims or problem and solution claims. So we ask students here to really dig deeper and identify those claims and certainly the supporting evidence and if the source is credible or not. And if there is support of the claims, then we would categorize this as an explanation. If not, again, it would be an opinion. System that we have developed in individualized learning labs with over 80 students, one-on-one, and also with their teachers. Students report that this system allows them to have a deeper dive into their text analysis and better understand the text. And
Zainab Osman, it looks like your audio is unmuted. Could you please mute?
And teachers say the process aligned with their overall ELA and social studies teaching goals. So this is the video clip we did for the Expo at Games, and let's just watch it for a brief minute.
Hi, I'm Nick, a high school teacher in Holland, Michigan, and I'm excited to introduce the W question system by Thinking Habitats. We use it in ELA and social studies.
The W question system empowers high school students to identify facts and fiction in the news. Watching interactive videos, students learn to unpack content of news articles, evaluate claims and evidence, and determine credibility and quality of the knowledge sources. These steps allow teachers to set the stage for an objective, safe discussion of current news events. In our research, 86% of students became proficient in their use of critical thinking and reading strategies. How does it work? The interactive videos model essential cognitive strategies, adapt to learning speed, provide instant feedback, and can be completed anywhere, even offline. Proficiency and growth are automatically tracked in the web portal for teachers. No grading needed. And teachers can easily integrate the W question system in any lesson plan. Empower your students with thinking tools that matter to their lives and contribute to your school's improvement plan.
So that was our quick demo video. And I wanted to do a quick dive into how those videos actually work. And we got most of our federal funding from the US Department of Agriculture to develop those interactive videos. And we have 7 videos for critical thinking and 7 videos for reading strategies. And each video is dedicated to a different cognitive strategy. So overall, how a video starts is that we have an introduction track where the student learns about that cognitive strategy and we model that specific skill. And then students engage in different activities, and that allows us to measure how well they understand or to start tracking their proficiency level. Halfway through the video, we do have a differential with a small algorithm that decides if the student should go into a modeling track or into a practicing track, still being in that video, right? So if you go into the practicing track, you are typically a student who's already kind of advanced, or you have already kind of good handle on this cognitive strategy. So it's a lot of rehearsing. While a student who is being placed in the modeling track within that video is getting more modeling. So we are taking it a step back, we explain it again, we use different examples, we go slower. And then at the end, the video tracks join together again, and students get a proficiency level. And that proficiency level is automatically tracked for the teacher in the gradebook. So a student could be not proficient yet. So it's the traffic light system here, right? So not proficient yet, proficient, and then the guy with the crown would be above proficient. And the students really love this. And we did not plan to really integrate a gamification effect here. But when we were doing our observations in the classrooms, students really wanted to have that little guy with that crown. So they were motivated to take the videos until they reached that above proficiency level. And then they got fist bumps from their teachers for achieving that highest level. So that was really exciting for us to see when we were in the classrooms. This is just a quick overview that the W question system can be used on any device that is web-based. It can be a phone, tablet, Chromebook, you name it. You can use it completely offline, so students can download it on their mobile device and complete all assignments there. And as soon as they get back into the school where they have Wi-Fi or anywhere where there is Wi-Fi, the system syncs and updates the overall system for the teacher automatically. So there's nothing really that needed to be done. And it's completely offline usable, which we really think is a huge strength for this technology. This is a list of the different interactive learning videos that we developed. So I mentioned we have 7 for reading strategies, and we have 7 for critical thinking strategies. And we are going to develop a couple of more for critical thinking strategies. But when you look at the critical thinking strategies, you can really see where it is about identifying facts and fiction and differentiating good sources from bad sources. So you can really see this. Identify claims, identify evidence, identify facts, opinions, explanations, sources, trustworthiness, evaluate an overall news event at the end. Research space. So we tested this in 29 high school classrooms with over 700 students, and 89% of the students reached proficiency level or above with respect to their reading strategies, and 93% of the students reached proficiency or above with respect to critical thinking. And again, we would like to thank the USDA for sponsoring this research. The W question system is a core feature of the front porch experience. The front porch experience is a 4 to 5 week online module that students can complete either online, face-to-face, or as a hybrid. And the front porch experience is an innovative school curriculum and integrated professional development program. It uses the local news media as a tool to help high school students build the critical thinking skills currently missing in the classroom and in the workplace. And it improves student test scores and district performance while creating more opportunities for young adults to thrive in their lives, careers, and communities. So I would really love to invite you to get a login for our free trial, and you would need to go to our website, www.thinkinghabitats.com, and you would land on our homepage, and you just need to click here. And this is all about the W question system, more research, more data, more information. And down here, you can see the registration. If you're a high school student or a parent who is signing up for a student or a teacher or school administrator, or just send us an email if you're somebody else and you're still intrigued and interested. So that would be all from us, from Thinking Habitats, with the flagship of the W question system as our core learning material. And I would hand it over to Nick for the next presentation.
Okay, thank you, Florian. I will share my screen. All right, hi everyone. My name is Nick Diana. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Persuasion Invasion, a civics education game, and specifically about one of the components in it called value adaptive instruction, and how that can be a useful tool in the fight against misinformation. So broadly, we're interested in this question of how we can use technology to make civil discourse more productive. And this includes the subject of that discourse, which is media, which can be, various shades of true or false, as we've been talking about. To a lot of people, this might seem like a maybe oxymoronic question, using technology to make civil discourse more productive. But hopefully today I can give an example of how technology might be actually a really useful tool in this domain. So similar to Rob's brief talk and kind of breakdown about misinformation, I tend to place efforts to combat misinformation into two camps. So there's great work like the stuff being done by my colleagues here to improve the user. So things like improving media literacy, critical reasoning skills, or making people aware of the kind of editorial discretion or lack thereof that gets exercised over the information we see. But there's also really interesting work being done on the other side of the equation. So improving the content itself. So hiring third-party fact checkers to verify information, or maybe using AI to detect fake news and then flag it in your news feed. Maybe you've seen these kinds of things on social media. So we have work being done on the user side and work being done on the content side. And our work really examines this dynamic relationship between these two sides. So we do this because how we consume information changes depending on what that information is, and frankly, depending on who we are as well as the content consumer. So maybe you know someone who, when they disagree with something, they're immediately skeptical of it. But if they read something that supports their kind of worldview, they accept it blindly as true. So in psychology, this is called my side bias. Sometimes people call it confirmation bias. And it happens when you evaluate an argument differently depending on whether you agree or not with that argument. So it hinges on this relationship between the user's values and then the values latent in the content they're consuming. And that relationship impacts how rationally they evaluate the content. So understanding this relationship can help us know when people might be most susceptible to bias, right? And when they should be exercising these important critical reasoning muscles. And if we can predict when people might be most susceptible to bias, then we can have targeted interventions given in those moments, saying, hey, those critical thinking skills we've been working on, now might be a good time to use them. So this is the kind of intervention that we've tried to integrate into our game Persuasion Invasion, which is really about practicing productive civil discourse strategies. And for the rest of my time, I'd like to talk a little bit about that intervention, how we implemented it, and what we found in our field experiments. So we call this kind of intervention value adaptive instruction. And this means that we're adapting the instruction that the student sees depending on this relationship between the player's values and the values latent in the content they're reading. So this essentially requires that we estimate the values on both sides of this equation and then compare them against one another. So to estimate the user's values, we use psychometrics like Jonathan Haidt's Moral Foundations Theory questionnaire. And then to estimate the values latent in text content, we use various natural language processing methods. So the output of both of these processes is in this case, a 5-dimensional vector that essentially represents, on the user side, it represents how much this particular player weighs things like fairness and loyalty when they're making moral judgments. And then on the content side, this vector represents how related this content is to things like fairness and loyalty. So we can use cosine similarity to compute the distance between these two vectors, which we call alignment. Basically, the extent to which a user's values align with the values in the text content that they're reading. Okay, so very technical. Let's see kind of what that looks like in the game. So here is an example of a kind of dialogue a player might come across in the course of Persuasion Invasion. So they've been gathering information about NPCs, figuring out what these NPCs care about, and now they're tasked with choosing an argument that appeals most to this particular NPC, in this case, Gordon, right? And so they're given some arguments, and each one of these appeals to a different moral foundation, so care or sanctity or respect for kind of authority and laws. So this is essentially a perspective-taking exercise that we're asking students to do. But there's also some room for bias here because let's say, for example, that you in particular, as the player, value sanctity, right? You may be most biased to choose this particular argument because it seems most persuasive to you as someone who values sanctity. But remember, the task here is to choose the argument that's most persuasive to Gordon, and Gordon might value this care foundation more. So in this case, your bias is steering you towards the wrong answer. It's making your civil discourse less productive. So our intervention is simple. It looks like this. Behind the scenes, we use natural language processing to guess which of the statements will be most persuasive to the player, to the individual player's values. And then we tell the player to essentially think carefully about this orange colored option because they might be more biased to choose it. And so we've done lots of experiments. There's been lots of studies on my side bias showing that We are biased to choose these kinds of things that align with our values. But what we're really interested in is whether or not showing this kind of intervention can reduce biased reasoning. And the answer, at least at this point, is sometimes. Here's the results from our most recent field study last spring. And so this graph shows the relationship between player performance on the y-axis and then something called the bias regulation index on the x-axis. Basically, how good a player is at overcoming bias when there's an opportunity to be biased. So the orange line here is our control condition. The dotted blue line is our adaptive condition that saw the intervention. And so here's the first graph is early in the game. Here's midpoint, and here's late in the game. And we could see that while the orange line, the control condition, stays relatively constant over time, there does seem to be a change here in the blue adaptive condition. So this relationship between bias regulation and performance changes for the people who saw this intervention. And specifically, what we see is that students who have some bias regulation skill appear to have benefited from seeing this intervention. They got better at regulating their bias over time with practice. But we also see that students with low bias regulation appear to have been negatively impacted by this intervention. We're not quite sure why that is. Our previous work suggests maybe it has something to do with a lack of trust in the system or an unwillingness to recognize biases. So the exact nature of this intervention still needs a lot more work to be done. But we think this first step demonstrates that we can use this kind of value adaptive instruction to better estimate and potentially mitigate the impact of bias, which we think is critically important because in this fight against misinformation and disinformation, ultimately how we respond to that misinformation depends on our relationship to it. So thank you. Again, we're taking questions. I think we're moving into the question and answer round now. So I will pass it up to back to Rob. But if you're interested in this, please don't hesitate to contact me, or if you'd like to check out the game, it's available at that link.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Florian. That concludes the presentations. I know folks have been participating in the chat. If you haven't gotten your questions in there yet, there is still time. I will pass to Tyler to do a little bit of moderation and pass around questions for response. Happy to talk on anything that was discussed here today.
Thanks, Rob. After we finish questions, Rob will put up the final slide, which has contact information for all the presenters if anyone wants to get in touch with us afterwards. Thanks. We've gotten some questions already. I'm going to start with the first one we got. The definition of fake news. I put a link to CISA's webpage where they give their definition of mis, dis, and malinformation. I hope that describes the problem accurately. I got a question of how do we prove or verify that we aren't training players to be misinformation creators? Technically, with our game, we obscured key details that you would need to actually replicate any of the misinformation, disinformation strategies that you're learning. Didactically, I guess I'd say, we reinforce the impression that these strategies are unethical and harmful. The game narrator overtly tells you that you are doing something that you should feel bad about. And you as the player are also prompted frequently with dialogue choices that express shame. And then empirically, we verify through surveys, through systematic feedback, that none of our players have felt that they were becoming, trained or better skilled at doing any of these things. So that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. We also got a question that I think applies to everybody. What are the challenges and opportunities getting K through 12 and university professors to adopt MDM games in their curricula. So Benjamin Rad had one answer, but I think maybe we'll start with let's start maybe with Rob from DHS. Could you maybe speak a bit about what are the challenges that you see and opportunities that you see in getting K-12 through university to adopt MDM games in their curriculum?
Yeah, I can only speak from CISA's perspective, which has a number of unique authority restrictions in this space. For us, it's passing down the best authoritative understanding of the risk to educators K through 12 or higher about potential impacts of systemic MDM. That hopefully fosters a willingness to participate in helping get the word out about MDM risk and very importantly, the best practices for countering. I think one of the key issues we face broadly is an overemphasis on what the risk landscape looks like versus empowering people that are presented with that risk landscape. And I think striking the balance for specific audiences will be key as we move forward. Obviously, you're going to give K through 12 a different presentation than you're going to give your freshman college student. We've worked with folks in the education field in the past. We've worked with Girls Security about getting people interested in the national security pipeline through conversations about MDM, which we think is another way to kind of address the MDM issue obliquely as part of an existing complicated world.
Anyone else, Florian or Nick, want to weigh in on that question of challenges or opportunities in getting your games into schools?
I think from pre-K to 12, well, I should only speak for high school. That's the target area we have. I think it shouldn't be a problem at all because, disinformation and looking into sources, credibility of sources, things like that typically align perfectly with the existing school standards like the Common Core standards or the C3 framework for social studies. So teachers could make easily an argument why this is valuable to their students. I think you still need to make a compelling argument to teachers and administrators how you can make a case why they should use the game, right? Is it making grading easier? Is it going to make something else more efficient? What type of other lesson plan would they replace with the engagement of or using a tool like that? So for us, it's a bigger problem or bigger opportunity because we have this fully fledged front porch experience, 4 to 5 weeks learning lesson, right? And the W question system is shorter because it's a short core video app. But you always need to make that argument for teachers. Why should they use it? How does it make their teaching life easier or more effective?
Thanks, Florian. Another question we had from Austin was for you, Florian. The strategies of your process are straight out of special education and speech pathology. Has your process been tested on students who receive special ed services?
So the W question system or asking W question, it's from everywhere, right? It's like an approach to unlock content. You find it in all content areas, you find it around the whole world. What's new for what we are doing with it is to lay a foundation, to cluster information first, and then with a second step to differentiate where do I need to dig deeper and where do I not need to dig deeper? So that's the trick here, that we interlace W question system with a critical thinking component in a very strategic way. And we tested it with many students, different versions of this, without W questions and with W questions, just looking at the critical thinking training or strategies. And students really do like that interlacement of W questions and critical thinking. We have not yet tested it specifically with students who have special educational needs, but we are working right now to make everything ADA, IDEA compliant. So we do have always students in our sample who are mainstream students or special ed students, but we have not done an intervention dedicated to special education yet. But we want to do that. I mean, I'm a trained special education teacher, so I would love to do that. So if there are opportunities out there, we would love to engage. Absolutely.
Thanks, Florian. And going around, so I guess starting with Nick, could you say how you selected the developers for your game? And then then we'll go to Florian, I guess, after.
Yeah, so the graphics and the audio were outsourced, but all the development was done in-house by yours truly. I guess looked in the mirror.
We are doing everything in-house too. I have a fantastic team of web designers, analysts, success coaches, teachers. So it's all developed as a team in a very democratic style in-house or online because of COVID-19.
Great. And Rob, I don't know how much you can share about your process or how much you're able to share at this point for the development of Bad News.
Oh, I think this is a great opportunity to give a shout out to your organization, actually. Our engagement through the technology engagement team and the tech incubator system has been instrumental in putting these kind of innovative approaches on the radar for the national security community. And really has given us kind of a robust menu to choose from when we decide to undertake efforts.
Thanks for the plug, Rob. And if anyone wants to hit us up afterwards and ask the State Department questions about, procurement and bidding and stuff, that's definitely best left to over email, where we can do it formally. So thanks for that question. A technical question for you, Nick, and keeping in mind we've got maybe 3 minutes before we have to take off to give everyone option to go to the next session. The question from Kenny to you, Nick, was if you can explain why there was a more pronounced negative effect from the intervention compared to benefits to those with higher bias, regulation, skill. Probably butchering that a bit. Can you answer, Nick?
Yeah, so I'll try to be brief. I think what Kenny alluded to is this kind of backfire effect. And I think that's a real potential problem in this domain, is people kind of doubling down on a belief when they're confronted about, especially potential bias. We're asking people to call into question their kind of worldviews, which they hold are very personal. So we have to kind of tread lightly. Other potential explanations for that could just be a bad kind of instruction about the intervention. So people kind of not really understanding what that orange text meant, maybe associating it with correctness, which it had no relationship with. So we're looking into kind of all of these things, but we've tried tons of interventions, and anyone who does debiasing work knows that debiasing interventions are particularly difficult to succeed at because bias is so robust. So yeah, we're definitely looking into it. And
the last question we got is, how do social justice, anti-racist, and anti-hate crime initiatives fit into your research? I think that's more directed at you, Nick, but I'll say that one of our key objectives in any kind of a tech tool that we're using to counter disinformation is that the tool has to be adaptable to different scenarios. We are actively trying to design our next game concept to be modifiable and adaptable to scenarios about a wider spectrum of malign influence, including radicalism, including health misinformation, and potentially including things like hate crime and bias. And how would you answer that from your perspective, Florian?
So from our curriculum perspective, we have a localized curriculum, the bigger part being the front porch experience, and students find their own local cause, what motivates them, what do they want to change in their community? And then they start reading local news articles on it, and they develop a capstone experience thinking about what mission could they have, what vision, what do they want to change it? And this is how we get it to that civic engagement level and students' motivation to engage in critical thinking. So, and I think that is where students can pick on their own social justice topics that they feel comfortable with. So we don't give them topics, they pick on their own. And we have topics like crime at school, drug use at school, discrimination, but also things like water pollution. So it's at all levels where students pick social issues or socio-scientific issues also that matter to them in their community.
Unfortunately, I have to cut this short. We've had a couple of questions we weren't able to answer. I'm going to turn it back over to Rob just for closing comments because we have to give folks a chance to plug into the next event. Over to you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Tyler. You guys have hopefully all had a chance to take down our contact information. We're all very responsive folks. Feel free to reach out to us individually on any follow-up questions. Thank you so much for attending. It's a critical and persistent problem, and we appreciate your help in working towards a solution.